Welcome to Red Ice Creations Radio. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Henrik Palmgren and we are coming to you from Sweden in Scandinavia. On Thursdays and Sundays we are here addressing important and interesting subjects with authors, researchers and filmmakers on a wide variety of subjects. Our website is redicecreations.com. That's REDICE creations.com. And there you'll find news, radio, videos, links and resources, our forum, our member section and much more. And today we have Jim Sanders with us on the line. He is a filmmaker, and if you remember just a few weeks ago when we had Jake Kotze with us, we briefly talked about the film Gnosis, and Jim is the man behind that project. This is still in production and we're going to return to talk more about that project later on down the road. But for today we have Jim with us to talk a little bit more about his background, some of his earlier film projects like Seeds of Change, The Real Thing. We're going to talk about some of the ancient sites and mounds around the Manitoba area. Talk a little bit more about the indigenous people, ayahuasca rituals, ceremonies, shamanism, and much, much more. So we have a few different websites to give out as well during the program, but you can start going to gnosis.tv right away and check out the latest trailer for that film, and that's due to be released sometime later on in 2009. So with that, thank you for coming on the program, Jim. Very nice to have you on the line.
It's my pleasure. Honor to be on. I've been following your site for a while, so this is great.
Perfect. Lovely to have you here, and nice to have you on, so short from just leaving off with Jake, so to speak. And we managed to hook up pretty much after the show we did with Jake there, so it's nice to have you on. And we have much to talk about today, of course, but I want to begin to talk a little bit about you and your background, Jim, and kind of a little bit, I guess, of your awakening process and how you got involved in the film work. Then we can move in to talk about films like Seeds of Change and The Real Thing and what those was basically about. But give us a little bit of your background, if you will, Jim.
Well, I guess my background this journey for me is I was very much very active in the anarchist movement, and very kind of active in the anarchist movement in North America, that as it kind of evolved into the whole post-Seattle 1999 anti-globalization movement. And so I was involved in cooperatives and various protests and actions and stuff like that. And so and then that evolved into going to these international trade protests. I went to Washington, D.C. To protest the IMF and World Bank in 2000, and then to Quebec City in 2001. And so I was kind of doing that circuit and kind of got mixed in a bit with the whole black bloc concept. And so I was definitely very much a rational-minded activist.
Yes.
Not thinking too much about esoteric or spiritual things, but that's kind of where I came from.
Interesting. And you were involved a little bit with indie media back then, I guess, also. Isn't that right? Yeah,
I remember I was very influenced by indie media, and I went to, in Quebec, I volunteered, and it was the first time I held a video camera was at the protest against the Summit of the Americas in 2001 in Quebec City, and so I got involved in indie media there, and so I was very inspired by that whole kind of movement, and so when I started making films and doing documentary stuff, it was very activist oriented, and we kind of created a little collective, and so I started making kind of videos that highlighted protest and things like that. Yeah.
Yes, and okay, you mentioned that you first began, picking up the video camera back in 2001. Did you have any kind of have you studied film at all, anything like that, or video, or
No, I've never. I did my degree in university was in political science and history, and I actually studied. I was focusing on actual early anarchist history, but I'd never used a camera, and I just kind of felt it was where I wanted to go, and very quickly after starting to do some video stuff, I realized how powerful of a medium it really is, and how people responded to it so well,
yes.
that hooked to it.
Very interesting, and of course your new material, especially from looking at the Gnosis clip. I mean that looks great, and it feels like it has a really kind of a artistic value as well, and it looks to be a very nice production, so to speak. And are you working with many other people right now, or are you doing it solely yourself at this point?
For the longest time it was really just I have a partner, Andre Clément, and but artistically and technically it was me just doing everything, camera, editing, all that stuff, and writing and everything, and he was more of the producer, kind of producing us. And we were a collective called Data World Data, and we still are, but we just don't really go under that name. And then increasingly, I started to get a little bit more into the art of it and taking it more seriously and improving everything I did, and I started to do actually a few things for broadcast. I did a couple things and started meeting more other artists and stuff. And so this project really, though, I've kind of let go of my hold on all the artistic, technical things, and I'm really kind of branching out to working with other people. Mm-hmm. So like even for this Gnosis, we're working with another editor where I do the initial editing, and then he does the makes it even fancier. And we've actually created a whole musical band around this whole project and concept, so all those people are working on the soundscapes of the thing. And so and I'm even we just recently did a shoot at the Manitoba Legislature for the film, and we actually used a real HD, and we had another camera guy, and more and more, but more and more people are actually kind of we don't really have any funding, so more and more people are just coming to the table and offering their services to working. We're all working together, so it's good.
Great idea. It sounds like a very good plan you guys have there. And I want to go back a little bit more and just talk about the are you still involved in any way in kind of the anarchist movement, or have you totally moved away from that?
No, I am. I mean, I don't. I'm not necessarily going to away to protests and stuff like that. But in Winnipeg, we have a very strong anarchist scene here, and I haven't isolated myself from those people. Where I'm still friends with everybody, and it's been a really good journey, because I know a lot of anarchists, a lot of activists that are, atheists and but are also very unhealthy. They're very paranoid, very anxious, and all sorts of things like that. And understandably, if you look at the world and you judge it from a material way, we're screwed, right? So
yeah.
I mean that's exactly where I was. It was like total, like, oh my, what's going on? It's going to be the end of the world and all that stuff. And
yeah.
So it's good. I find it's good because many of my anarchist friends are much more open to, they know me, they respect me, and so they're more open now to some of these concepts. And so I'm starting to bring into the ayahuasca with different activists and stuff. And because I still consider myself an activist,
But on a different level, I guess.
Exactly. So, and I think, integrating that activism with shamanism is a very powerful mix.
And I mean, for people that hear the term, anarchist, might be, terrified by that. They think of violence and stone throwing kids, in black ski masks or what have you. But what would you say define an anarchist in the era, at least, that you were talking about, around 2000 and moving on from there?
Well, I mean, I think it's believing that everyone has the right to be equally free, though your freedom shouldn't impinge on someone else's freedom. So within that is some kind of harmonious society that anarchists are dreaming about. But everyone calls anarchists utopian, and I think if you look at anarchism, it's not utopian. It's very much about building it here in the now, and the propaganda by the deed, and not in a negative, violent way, but in the sense of like walking the walk and walking the talk and doing and not just like building cooperatives now and building things now. And so it was a very it's not for me, it wasn't a violent or a movement. There was definitely those different views and tactics and stuff like that people were using, and I definitely had respect for people using different tactics and things. But
yes,
I was very I've been so inspired by the cooperative and collective efforts that have come out of the anarchist movement. And ultimately, what's through this journey into shamanism and spirituality, it's allowed me to see that anarchists are very spiritual people. They just don't necessarily all know it. They're
Yes.
they're basically screaming from their heart, right? And
Yes.
and that's a spiritual thing. So I think it was very much the personal alchemy that allowed me to eventually awaken and go down that road. And
Do you think it's an important step, so to speak, to take, or maybe anarchism in that sense actually is the first kind of step? I'm thinking back a little bit to at least the mentality. I never kind of was the kind of guy who joined the movement in that regard, or put a name on myself in that regard. But if I actually would have done that, I would reckon that anarchist actually would be kind of the closest to it in a way, just because of the sake of what you're pointing out there with regards to individual freedom as well, that one has the right to do, and live his or her life in the way they want to live it. But do you think that that's an important kind of first step to take? And if so, you have obviously moved on from there now, and how did that kind of step happen for you? What was the kind of spark that pushed you in the right direction, so to speak?
Well, I do think it's an important step, and I do think that place of incredible frustration, disillusionment, and anger, and discovering the truth and all that is necessary or critical for an awakening, right? And it kind of spurs you on to seek, right? So, and that's exactly what it did for me. I went down to South America for the first time, very much in that mindset, and what really kind of triggered me and woke me up was first the people of South America and the social movements of South America, which are incredibly inspiring, but more so even the indigenous movements, right? And which I actually found and still find the closest to my anarchist ideal than anywhere. So, and then I seeing the indigenous people interweaving that kind of social protest and fearlessness with spirituality and relationship with nature was the clincher to make me go down that road.
Okay, before we kind of dive into talking more about Juan Flores, your teacher, and some of the other things around Manitoba, of course, and other kind of shamanistic rituals like ayahuasca and so forth, maybe we can talk a little bit more about some of the earlier films that you did. I think you mentioned that Seeds of Change were your first film. Tell us a little bit about that and kind of how you got onto that track, so to speak.
Well, Seeds of Change was my first attempt at a film, and I definitely wasn't trained in knowing how to make a feature film, but I had a professor and his student at the University of Manitoba approached me about making a film to do with their research on, it was the first publicly funded research project on studying genetic engineered crops in Canada. And where I'm from in Manitoba and Winnipeg, it's it's prairie heartland and it's agricultural heartland, and a lot of the research to develop these crops has come from here. So genetically engineered canola and wheat was developed here, and specifically by Monsanto, which has its Canadian headquarters at our university here. So they hired me to make this film, and I knew nothing about genetic engineering. And I actually was a very much urban-based activist at that point. And so heading off into the rural countryside, learning from farmers, learning about genetic engineering, learning about Monsanto, and ultimately learning about the biotech world, just shook me to the core. It was, as an activist, it was, here's something that, it seemed like if it got out, we could never return, that it was so end of the world kind of situation. And the more I went into this world of biotech and saw these scientists, I remember I snuck into this international biotech conference in Toronto, and with like 15,000 biotech scientists, people there, and I was just shocked with their ideas and and their anti-farmer, anti-rural, anti-nature view.
Did you manage to catch any of that on film, or?
Yeah, I did actually. I got a bunch of it on film, and so we made this film, and I'm a firm believer in making films. I'm not big into the legal copyright world side of things, and so I made this film and got lots of really good stuff on it.